Hello everyone, this is Professor Radigueri, and this is going to be a brief introduction or overview of the Markstrat simulation. So hopefully you'll get some good information out of it, and it'll help you up front as you're trying to figure out how things work before we get into the practice rounds. So the first thing you want to do is you want to go to www.stratxsimulations.com, and it'll ask you who you are. So you please select participant, and when you get to this, enter your participant activation key. This was given to you when you registered. It should have come to you in an email. Just enter that and click submit, and then click this big green button and ensure your pop-up blockers are off. And it doesn't like me yet. Okay, now we're up. Alright, so on this screen all you need to do is enter in your 4-digit password, which you should have also received from me. So go ahead and enter that in and click access your team. Now it makes sense that you would have gone through all the documents and materials on the website before you start to look at this, just so you kind of get a rough idea of what's going on. But basically, you're going to serve as the brand manager for this company, and this company creates two types of products: Sonites and Vodites, and they're just MP3 players, mobile phones, iPod Touch type products, whatever you want to call it. And basically, you're going to be competing against other teams within your class, and you're going to try to do what you can to do better than them. Okay, so this is the main screen. Here you can kind of see a bunch of different buttons, a bunch of different features. We'll go through all of this here shortly. Just want to draw your attention to this side over here. As you go through and you make your decisions, if there's some problems, it'll tell you how many errors you have. So if I click on this, it'll bring up the errors. Okay, so basically, if you don't make a particular decision, it'll tell you that you haven't done that. So just keep that in mind. Also, a little quirk though, if you purposefully choose not to make a decision one particular period, say you want to keep your price the same so you don't do anything, it'll pop up an error there. Don't worry about it. Just make sure that's the only error you have. Budget deviation. This tells you how much what you've planned to spend deviates from the money you actually had. So make sure you try to keep that in the positive range. Okay, so this is the main screen. This is company results. This is just where you're able to look at information about the company and how you're doing. Company dashboard just gives some very broad information. It provides your stock price over time, revenues, earnings, market shares, those types of things. It's good information, but it's not great information because it aggregates across all or includes all segments, so you can't look and see your performance on any particular segment. So it's good information, but really isn't going to help you making any sort of decisions. Financial report, kind of the same thing. It's very broad. Shows you how you've done week by week or period by period. And this is just a dummy simulation that I set up, so these numbers have absolutely nothing to do with the numbers you'll have. So you got market share, volume sold, brand prices. I do want to draw your attention to brand prices. You'll see three prices here. First price is recommended retail price. You sell these products not to end users, but you sell it to retailers. So you might sell it to Target or to Best Buy or other places where electronics are sold. So you specify to the retailer the price you suggest they should sell it for. Because of laws, you can't say you have to sell at this price. You just have to have a suggested price, and they can price it how they choose, and they can come down off of that if they want. So that's the top price. The middle price is average retail price, meaning the average price that the product was sold by the retailer across all distribution channels, across all segments. So that's the number. And then the bottom number, average selling price, is the price that you got per unit. So if you're doing some budgeting, some forecasting, and you say, well, I want to sell the product for $250, you're not going to get $250 because $250 is what the retailer gets. You'll get the average selling price of 156. Where does the 156 come from? Basically, there's just in the algorithm is a formula, and it calculates a number based on what the retailer sells the product for. You get a certain percentage of that. Okay, so anyways, again, just very broad information, not as useful because there's no segment based information here, but we'll get to that in a minute. Production report, again, broadly, this just shows you how many products that you've produced. So in this example, this company for brand Most, by the way, all the brands are 4-letter words, start with an M. If you're team M, if you're team R, for example, it's going to start with an R. So in this situation, produced 120,000 of each of these two brands, both Most and Move, and sold all 120,000 of them. Are we happy about that? Yeah, we're pretty happy, but you got to be careful when you sell out, because that means that there are people that wanted to buy your product that weren't able to. So they quite possibly went to your competition. So you want to make sure that you try to have a little bit of inventory left. Okay. This just kind of summarizes the graphic there. This just basically talks about costs of the products you sold and how much you had left. You know, if you have inventory left, there'll be a holding cost, but you know, as long as you don't have a huge inventory left, you should be just fine there. Not a big deal. Okay. R&D report. Here we can look at information about our research and development projects. So this is the trickiest part of Markstrat. Some people get a little confused here, but R&D works just like R&D does in the real world. If Apple wants to make a brand new iPhone, they don't just start pumping out those iPhones the next day. They go to the R&D department and say, hey, I want the new iPhone to have these particular characteristics. They say, okay, we'll get on it, chief. And so they go and they get on it, and at some point they have a prototype, and the prototype at that point is ready then to be turned into actual produced, marketable, for sale products. So when you see this here, anything that starts with a P is a project. It's not a product, it's a project. Okay, so in this example, what I have here up the top, this POSS, this is a research project that I had put together using these particular characteristics for a product. I say, okay, well, I think the market will respond well to this. Build me a product based on these attributes. Tell me what it's going to cost. And then once the simulation is run in the next period, that research and development project is ready to be turned into a sellable product. So I'll show you in a minute, but then you can take this project and turn it into a product, either a brand new product or maybe a brand that you're just going to modify. Okay. So you'll see here, POSS is a brand new R&D project that I put together. What you have here below are the base projects that the two existing brands that you have were based on. So when you start the simulation, you won't have to make these projects; they're already there. Okay, so so this screen just shows you what R&D projects are there and available for you to use. And now, if you have another R&D project that isn't finished yet, you'll have that information down here. Okay, we'll talk more about R&D later, but just note that product and project are totally different, and you have to have an available project in order to make a new product or a new brand. Okay. All right, decision review. Once you've made decisions, you'll come here, and this will show you, basically summarize the decisions that you made. Okay, and this looks a lot of you know, foreign stuff, but don't worry. As you learn more about the project, and about the simulation, you'll do fine. Okay. Across the top, if you hover on Prepare, Home takes you back to the screen where you log in. You don't ever have to worry about that. Analyze, four options, company results, which is this particular screen right here. Market and competitive news, we'll get to in a minute. Market research, we'll get to. Charting tool. The charting tool is only available starting in period 1. So there has to be one round of decisions done before you can use a charting tool. So when you first log into Markstrat, you're probably not going to see that there. And then decide, this is where you actually go and physically make your decisions. I want to start with that, but real quick I want to show you something. Even though you're Team M or Team whatever it might be, you can change your team name. So you click on Team Info. I thought there was a way you can change your team name. I don't see it here. If you run across it, let me know. I know I've done it. But anyways, we'll get back to that later. Okay, so I want to show you kind of physically where you make your decisions. So when I say your decisions are due, you've got to go and make some decisions. So if you click on Decide and Home, this gives you all the different screens that provide places for you to make decisions. So if you click on R&D, first of all, we can start a new project. We're going to focus on Sonites in this class. So if you click on Sonites, we can say we want to make a new product with particular dimensions. We're going to call the project POLL. Project's objective is, I don't know, to sell tons. Okay? Click on Next. Here, then you specify your features. And you have all these different dimensions here. So you've got number of features, design, battery life, display size, processing power. The features that you choose are up to you, but they should be based on information about the market, information about competition, and there are lots of screens here to give you lots of information on that. So just for fun, we're just going to type in some numbers. It doesn't really matter. There's no rhyme or reason to these. Okay. So I've just put some numbers in there just to show you how you can create some attributes for a new product. Okay. Then what you should do is you should click on Develop this project at the lowest possible base cost. Okay. And once you do that, you should click Next. Okay. And then what this does is lead you to this screen where you can basically it summarizes the attributes that you've chosen. Then what you can do is you can look, using this feature down here, you can figure out what this product is going to cost. So if you click on Allocate to this project, the budget specified below. If we click on Query, it basically tells us how much money it's going to cost to create this project. Okay, so you're only allowed 5 queries per period. So we're going to go ahead and just click on Run, and it tells us $1,430, or actually it's $1.43 million are required to create this project. And this will come out of your budget, of course. So if you're okay with that, you click Next. I want to tell you something here that you've got to be very careful about. If you click Initiate a feasibility study for this project, your R&D project will not be run in the next period. So you won't be able to have the R&D project completed and ready to be turned into a product for at least an extra period. Okay, so it just allows you to get a better idea of what the market wants and how much it's going to cost and all that. So I would say don't ever use that. Okay, so I'm going to go back, click on Allocate this budget. I'm going to click Next. Okay. And this shows us the project and everything. So this decision has been made. We now have, if you click on R&D Overview, you can see here that we now have this R&D project set to run once we run decisions. You can always go back and change that, but there it is. Okay, brand portfolio. This is where you decide a lot of things about your brands. What brands you're going to sell, at what price you're going to sell them for, how many you're going to produce, how you're going to advertise, all those things. Okay, so as you can see here in this particular example, we have 3 different brands that are currently set to be sold in the next period, if we so choose. So we've got Most, we've got Move, and we got Mop. You can see Most here. Most, the portfolio operation is maintained. That means it's going to be the same as the previous period. Okay. The base project for Most is PO Most, which I showed you earlier. So it's just kind of the default project that came with the simulation. In period 4, we're gonna continue using the product based on PO Most. Okay, so we're gonna keep everything the same. Move. Move has been around since period 0. We're going to modify it. In last period it was based on its default project. But in the next period we're going to base it on POS, which is a different R&D project that's already been completed. And I showed you that on the other screen. Okay? Then we have a new product that we're going to start. Okay? So basically, let me undo this real quick. Okay. So now we're back to the two original products. Most we're going to keep the same. Move we're going to modify it to have it based on the POSS project. But I also want to show you, just for illustrative sake, how you create a new project or start a new brand. So click launch a new brand. They're going to just put PO whatever. What's its role? I'm sorry. Brands have to start with the same letter as your team name. So I have to start with an M, and because it's a sonite, it has to have an O as the second letter. Let's just call it MOX, okay? The role in the portfolio is to be the best, and it's clearly not working. I'm not sure why that is. We're going to create MOX, this brand new brand, based on this R&D project POS, okay? Okay. To role in the portfolio, I don't know why to ask you this, just put something to be awesome. So we've got MOX, we've specified a role, we're going to base it on POSS, and we click launch. So the way it is now, in the next period we're set to have most stay the same, move be based on POS, and MOX be a brand new brand also based on POS. It wouldn't make sense in reality to have two brands based on the exact same R&D project. This is just for illustrative purposes. Okay, so if you're happy with everything there, click on Decision Home, and it goes back to this. Then we click on Marketing Mix. This is where you specify price and production and those types of things. Okay, so first we look at most. Currently we plan to produce 200,000 units, have a MSRP of $250, and have an advertising budget of 1.5 million. Move, we've got a different set of numbers there, and then MOX we have unspecified. So say we want to, we think that most is going to do better than we've expected, okay? You can see here that most sold 120,000 units last time, which we sold out, we had none left. So this time we think we're going to sell 250,000. So we can change the number there. Let's say we want to lower the price to $245. You can do that there. Advertising, how much money do you want to spend on advertising? Last period you spent 1.5 million. If your brand awareness or your market share is low, you might want to beef this up. So you can change this number to whatever you want. I'm going to go 1.6 million. Advertising research, I'm going to beef this up. Now what advertising research is basically the advertising agency will do some research to find out what particular target markets respond to the best. Okay, so this will allow, if you allocate some money to advertising research, the advertising that you end up doing will be much more effective because the advertising agency knows exactly what appeals to the consumers and all that good stuff. So it's a good idea to have some advertising research money in the budget. Okay, then you allocate which segments you're going to target, and you can target them all, you can target just one, it's really up to you, but just for fun's sake, let's say we're going to target 50% to the explorers, 50% to the profs. So what we're going to do is we're going to advertise these products to the explorers and to the professionals in whatever way the advertising agency sees as the most important. Okay? Perceptual objectives. I should probably come back to this, but what these are is just perceptual objectives are objectives for the messages in the advertising. So you can say, I want the advertising for most to promote it as a low-cost leader. So the advertising agency will go out and produce an ad that shows value. Or maybe I want most to be positioned as a high-quality brand. So what they'll go in is they'll promote it as a high-quality brand. So it allows you to kind of target the advertising to the groups with a particular message. So what you can do is you can look at the different attributes, and again we'll come back to this, but what you can do is you can say, for example, well, most it's targeted to the lower end people that like value. So what we're going to do is we're going to create economy all the way to 20. So we're really going to focus on it being a cheap brand. Okay. And you can also specify a second dimension. Say, well, yeah, it's cheap, but it performs okay. So we're going to have performance be about, in the middle. So this allows us to, like I said, to have some specific goals in our advertising to change the marketplace's perceptions of the particular product. And with these current things highlighted, what we're going to do is we're going to signal to the market that it's a good product for the value. It's very affordable. Okay. If you click on marketing mix expenditures, basically it shows what we've done. Okay. So this aggregates across all your brands, so you don't necessarily need to look at this until you get to the end. So let's go back to Decision Home and start over. Go back into Market Mix. Let's say we want to keep Move the same. We're not going to change the price, advertising, how much we produce. But let's go to Mox. We've got this new product. Let's say Mox is for the super high end. So we're going to say 50,000. Let's say 100,000 units. Let's say $650. It's a brand new product. There's no awareness. Remember, advertising is used to increase awareness. So we're going to blitz the market here. We're going to do a lot of research so we know exactly what consumers want. We're going to focus this just on the high earners. Okay. Multidimensional scaling, economy. Since this is a super high-end product, we want our economy to be negative. So the higher the economy number, the cheaper it's going to be perceived as. So the lowest number on economy is what we want. So that is right there. Now if we go to marketing mix expenditures to see what we have spent, we've increased our marketing expenditures by 83% because we've got a new product. We're now managing 3 products instead of 2. Okay. So now that's done. Commercial team. This is where we decide where we're going to actually sell the product. So these are, when I say commercial team, we're talking about salespeople. So these are salespeople that go in and sell products to the different retailers. Okay. Be sure you read your manual, but there are 3 channels or 3 types of retailers in Markstrat that will be used to sell your products. Specialty stores, which are going to be high-end stores. Mass merchandisers like Target, where they sell tons of everything and they sell it cheap. And then online stores, which is someplace in the middle. More technical oriented people go there. They may not necessarily be as price sensitive. So 3 different channels. So if Mox is super high end, we're going to sell it mainly in specialty stores, because specialty stores are high end stores. Okay. If we then click on commercial team budget, we'll see how things have changed. We're going to beef up specialty stores, mass merchandisers, online stores, only because we've added salespeople for our new brand. Okay. Okay. So now we've specified which products we're going to sell, what price, how many we're going to produce, where we're going to try to sell them. Let's look at market research studies. This just basically talks about where we want to spend our money on researching the market. So a big part of marketing is understanding the marketplace. So it makes sense to spend a lot of money on market research. So my advice to you is in every single period to order all the market research studies. Now we're focusing only on the Sonites. So you don't need to worry about the Vodites market. Make sure these are all non-highlighted. So we're going to order all studies and then click Decision Home. Now, if we go back and look at our errors, you can see here that we have exceeded our budget limit. Okay, so this is a problem. So if you exceed your budget limit, what you want to do is you want to go back and change something. So we're $73,000 in the hole. So let's go to Mox and let's reduce advertising research by whatever that would be. Let's just go 400. Okay. If we go back to Decisions Home, that's going to update. So we've got $27,000 left that we can do with what we want, or we don't have to. My advice to you would be to completely use every single dollar. Don't leave any on the table. Okay. So, all right. What marketing plan does is it allows us to kind of look at our different segments and kind of understand how big the segments are and use that to forecast sales. So if we look at last period's data, these are the number of people in each segment in the Sonite market. Explorers at 115,000, shoppers 250,000, and on and on. However, there's a market forecast that says that, well, no, these segments are going to grow. So if you click on copy market forecast, it changes the number. So you'll see here that the numbers just changed. Explorers actually has gone down and the others have gone up. So if you're targeting particular segments here, you want to know if the segments are growing or shrinking. Click on the next screen. This kind of tells you what the market share for each of your brands is in each of the segments. Okay? So basically this just allows you to get a good idea of how many you should sell in each segment. Okay, so basically all this is done is it's taken the size of the segment, multiplied it by your market share, and that tells you roughly how many they expect you to sell in each of these segments. Okay, so for most, pretty heavy on savers and shoppers, pretty light on the others. Move is pretty heavy in profs, and decent in explorers and shoppers, and pretty light on the rest. Okay, so this gives you an idea of how many to produce, so you should definitely consider these numbers when determining how many to produce. Now, if you're doing well at what you're doing, hopefully you're going to grow within each segment. Your market share is going to go up. So, saying we want to produce 146,590 of most next period is not a good idea because you're going to sell out probably. So you want to have some sort of buffer. I don't really know of a benchmark, but I would say probably produce at least 175,000 in this context. Okay. Alright, so there's some problem going on here, so I can't move, but hopefully we can go back to our okay, good. We can go back to this screen and back where we started from. Okay, so that summarizes all the decisions. Now I want to turn around and look at some other information because, yeah, you now know how to make all the decisions, but what's the rationale for those decisions? I just showed you how to produce, how many to produce, but how do we decide how to price the product? How do we decide how do we decide where to sell the product? How do we decide how to advertise? That's where all this research comes into play. So if we click on market and competitive news, this gives us a number of things. First, industry dashboard. Okay, first thing here is it gives you the stock market price for period 3. We can also call this SPI, which is share price index. Now this is where the performance portion of your grade is going to come from. So you're going to be competing against all your competitors. 60% of your grade is going to come from stock price index. So in this case, M is in first place, R is in second, T is in second place, R is in third place, and S is in fourth. It's a little weird that it doesn't update, doesn't sort based on the stock price index, but just note that the better your stock price index is, the better your grade is going to be performance-wise in this course. It has no bearing on the grades of your actual reports, but performance-wise, it's important. Okay, the rest of this information it's interesting, but again, it doesn't break down based on segments, which is what you're really interested in. So you don't really necessarily have to spend a whole lot of time here. Just note that T has 28% market share, R has 27%, M has 24%, and S has 20%. What does that mean? It doesn't mean too much. It's cool, but for the purposes of this game, it's not that huge. Industry information. Okay, this information again, it's aggregate. It's how many products are sold in the entire market. How much money is spent research costs, those types of things. Again, don't worry about it too much. Market report. Okay, this is research that just gives you an idea of the attributes of all of the competitors. Okay, so you know, it shows market shares up here, which is interesting, but if you look down here, what's even more interesting are the brand characteristics. So basically, if you want to create a new R&D project, say you want to compete against, say, Soft, how do you know how to produce a product that will be favorable to the market segment in which Soft competes? And this is how you do it. You look here and you see what their attributes are, and you take that as a jumping off point and decide what you want to do. You may be able to just completely mimic all these attributes, or maybe you can mimic most of them but then maybe enhance one that might be more appealing to the Soft market, to the segments that buy Soft. So this gives you information about the attributes of all the products, should help you in designing or modifying your own products. Okay, so that's this market and competitive news. Just want to note that this S up here just means Sonite. We're not really worrying about the Vodite market, so S is Sonite. It gives you, just let you know that all the information here is for Sonite. Okay, if we go down to market research, click on this, it's going to give you a ton of information about the consumer, about what it is the consumer likes, what they want. Okay, so if you first look at industry benchmarking, again, this is just this is not about the consumer. My apologies. This is about just basically financial performance. Okay, so you've got revenues, earnings before taxes. You know, the better you are in this, the better your stock price is going to be. But you manipulate that through marketing effort and not through, you know, any sort of financial effort. Okay. Profit and loss, again, not super important, except for this down here tells you what the budget is for each of the firms. Okay. So if you're M, you see you have the highest budget, so you'll be able to spend more money on advertising, more money on research. You'll be able to allocate more salespeople, which should give you a leg up. If you're one of these lower ones, you have to figure out how to make do with less. Consumer survey and panel. Okay, here we find information about consumers. Brand awareness. How aware are consumers of your brand, or of, you know, any brand? So I wouldn't worry about this chart up here, but the brand awareness by consumer segment is very important. If you're Most and you're targeting savers, you've got 58% awareness, which is okay, but it greatly lags rock and soft and tone within that particular segment. So what you want to do is you want to increase advertising, which should increase awareness of your brand. Okay, people can't buy a brand if they don't know about it, so you need to boost awareness. I would say once you get your brand awareness for any particular segment above 70%, you're good. Try to maintain 70%. There's no point going from 70 to 80 to 90 because the money that it would cost to get there is probably not going to be paid back in purchases. Okay, so awareness is good, but purchase interest is even better. So purchase intentions by consumer segment, you can basically see that consumers have been asked questions about what brand they intend to buy, and this is where they kind of fall. So if you're Most, for example, you know that 10% of explorers want to buy your product, 90% of shoppers, 19% of savers, 0% of professionals and high earners. So this gives you a good idea of which segments you should target. You know, there's really no point in targeting professionals and high earners because they don't care about your product. It's just not in their realm. So I wouldn't worry about that. So this gives you ideas about who to target. Okay. One thing I didn't mention that you'll read in the handbook is that each of these segments, explorers, shoppers, etc., they all have different preferences. Some are rich, some are not so rich. Some buy high end, some buy low end. Some don't really care. Some buy at mass merchandisers more than the others. Some buy at online stores more than the others. So it's good to know ahead of time the profile of each of those segments before you start targeting them. That way you know where to reach them, how to price to them, and those types of things. Okay? Shopping habits. This just shows the shopping habits of each of the 5 segments. As you can see, explorers spend most of their time shopping at specialty stores and very little online or at mass merchandisers. Compare that to savers that spend most of their time purchasing at mass merchandisers and much less at savers and online stores. So if you're targeting savers, for example, you don't want to spend a whole lot of effort getting your products into specialty stores and online stores, because the savers just aren't going in there. They're going to go straight to the target, to the large discounters. So that's good information. Market share. Purchase intentions talk about what people are going to buy. This one, market shares, talks about what they have bought. Okay? So market shares based on the number of units sold. In the Explorers, you can see here that Move has the largest market share, but there's a pretty competitive segment because there are lots of competitors with market share of at least 10%. Compare that to high earners, where you've got one guy has 58% share, one guy has 26% share, and everything else is very low. So this also gives you a good idea of who you should target. Now, there is some correlation between purchase intentions and market share, so you still want to do what you can to enhance intentions, because that will enhance market share. Okay, and then down here you have the unit sales, which we also saw in that the market forecast screen in the marketing plan. So it just gives you a good idea of how many are sold in each segment, and you can use that, multiply it times market share to see roughly how many you sold. Okay, distribution panel. This just gives us information about the different channels. Okay, so here that let's go with number of stores, because you can really do either, but they are a little bit different. So this one's more important because this is the percentage of stores that carry a particular brand. Okay, so if you're Most and you're selling to mass merchandisers, you see here that 49% of all mass merchandisers carry your product. That's good, but it's not great, because 60% of savers, if this was your target market, shop at mass merchandisers. So you need to be in more mass merchandisers, no doubt. So you want to try to boost that up. Okay? So we know where different segments like to shop. This gives us an idea of where our products actually are sold. We want these to match up to the purchasing or shopping habits of our targeted segments. Okay, semantic scales. Alright, this just gives us information about how our individual products are perceived. We can use this information when creating new brands or modifying existing brands. And they're just on a scale of 1 to 7, 7 being high, 1 being low. Okay? And what's important to do is to take perceptions of your brand, so say Most, and compare that to the perceptions of, to the ideal values of your particular segment. So if we're Most and we're targeting savers, we know that savers don't need a ton of features. So the features number between 1 and 7 is much lower than how the product is perceived. On the flip side, savers are more interested in design than the brand is perceived. Battery, they don't necessarily need much battery life. Display, they don't really care too much. Power, they do want more power than what you're giving them. Price is pretty much, the perceived price of Most is pretty much in line with what consumers want. Okay? Alright, now, these down here are very important. I'm going to show them to you in a different screen, because you've got different features, and then what we have here are perceptual maps, which you should have seen from the recent lecture. Allows us to compare one brand to another the position of each on two different dimensions. So if you look at price versus features, for example, you've got most way up here, you've got move over here, you've got soft here, you've got roll there. It's all well and good by itself, but what's most important is to know how it relates to the ideal values of a particular segment. Okay, so this really corresponds to this information up here, these two charts. But quite simply, for example, if we're targeting savers, this is savers' ideal spot on this map for price and features. They want a low price, and the features, they don't need that many features. Okay, so if you're most and you're trying to target savers, just look and see that you are far away from the savers' ideal values on this map. So what you want to do is you want to do what you can to try to get most to move towards savers. So what you would do is you would probably keep the price the same, but maybe reduce the number of features to something that consumers want. So you do that through changing the product via R&D. Okay, so you can take the numbers up here, go and modify the product for most in such a way that more appeals to the savers market. Because you see right now, even though most is a pretty nice chunk of the savers market, you've got rock, which is right on top of it. So going forward, rock is going to do very well in this marketplace. Okay, so as a general rule, the closer you are to the ideal values of a particular segment, the better your sales are going to be. Now, the challenge here is we've got all these different features and you've got all these different dimensions. You've got price and features, price and design, price and battery, price and display, price and power. It's like, how do you decide which ones to use? Well, the obvious example to that is you combine them into what's called multidimensional scaling. Okay, and this allows us to look at all those features in a more condensed version. So we've gone from 5 charts to 2. We've got economy versus performance. So economy basically is price. Performance is just kind of an aggregate or an average of all those different performance features. Okay, and this is economy versus convenience. When we say convenience, we talk about how easy is it to use the product, how easy is it to kind of carry the product around. So for example, the smaller it is, the more convenient it's going to be. Okay, so my recommendation is to focus, however, on this one, economy and performance. You're looking at the price of the product versus how well the product performs. Okay, so if you're most, you see that you're in pretty good shape with Saver. Okay, so you're doing pretty well on the economy. An economy level of 10 is pretty cheap, not super cheap, but pretty cheap. So it's pretty well in line with what savers want. Okay, so but if you were trying to target explorers, for example, with most, what you would want to do is probably raise your price and then enhance the performance of that. Okay, so if you have to move the product, the brand, somewhere else on the map, you can do it primarily 2 ways. The first way is R&D, like I've just mentioned a couple times. Another thing is, if you're not too far away from the ideal values, what you can do is use the perceptual objectives in advertising that we talked about earlier to kind of enhance perceptions. So for example, if we wanted to move most to the right to be perceived as a little more on the low end, instead of lowering our price, which might take away revenue, what we can first do is set up our perceptual objectives in advertising to really focus on the value, the low cost of our product. So it will change people's perception of that brand, and so we might be able to move most closer to the ideal values without having to lower our price. Okay, so again, as a general rule, if you have to move a brand all the way across the map, you want to just modify the brand with R&D. If you want to move just a little bit, you generally can get away with multidimensional scaling. Okay, so here's all the multidimensional figures down here. We can also see the ideal values of each segment, how they do move. So these circles here are going to move around the map too, not a ton, but a little bit. So as you can see here, economy Explorers are becoming less and less price sensitive. And that's pretty much the same for performance. Their performance is becoming less and less important. Convenience is becoming more important, actually. Okay, high earners. Economy is not very important at all. It's becoming a little bit more, but not much. So this allows you to get an idea of where your particular segments are going. So a lot of information there. Okay, competitive intelligence. This just gives us information about all the competitors. Okay, gives us an idea of how much money they've spent on advertising and how much reach they have in each particular segment and also in each particular channel. So this information might become handy at some point as well. Okay, experiments. This is part of the advertising research, or I'm sorry, or the market research. So you can look and see, you can play through this and see just if any of this applies to you. But basically, if you change, number of salespeople, what is that going to do to different things? Okay. All right, market forecast. This just gives an idea of where the market's going. Current market size is 986. Next period is going to be up 1181. Next period is going to be 1735, and we go on and on and on. Again, more important to look at it breakdown by segments. If you're targeting savers, for example, you can see that within 5 periods you're going to more than have doubled the segment size. Okay, so that's good. If you're targeting explorers, you should be concerned because the segment is shrinking. You're going to lose, 20% over the next 5 periods. Okay, so that information should help you decide how to target. If you're targeting a segment that's growing and you're doing a good job, obviously you want to beef up the production of the product you're selling to them. On the other hand, if your target segment is shrinking, you have some tough decisions to make. If you stay with it, you're going to have to cut back forecasts or cut back production because there aren't as many people around to buy your products. You may decide to exit the market as well. So lots of information about the market itself right there. Okay, and then finally, conjoint analysis, just even more information about how consumers in each segment value the different attributes, what utility it brings to them. Okay, so that's all the information you have there. Charting tool. There's a pop-up, it looks like. Let's try that again. Okay, the charting tool just provides us a lot of different information to chart, different features. So this is the market growth for the Sonites is going to kind of shrink. It's almost 20% growth in period 1. In period 2, it's going to be only about 17%. And this makes sense. As the market grows, the growth rate tends to slow down, kind of diminishing returns, if you will. So you can just play with this. There's all kinds of different charts here you can use. Should come in quite handy. Okay, that's it. It's a lot of information to digest. So please go through it a couple times. Play with it a lot. Feel free to make a bunch of decisions. Figure out how to do it. We have the practice rounds to help you kind of get more comfortable with it. I know it's overwhelming. It's a lot of information, but trust me, it will make more sense as we go through this, and I expect you'll end up loving it. So again, once you make your decisions, you do them all here, and once you're done, just click log out and you will be done. Anybody in your group can make decisions, so just be careful and make sure that you guys are all on the same page about what's going on. And I would recommend that each of you designate one person to be the one that physically enters in all the decisions. That way toes don't get stepped on and miscommunication is kept to a minimum. So that's it. Log out, you're done, and you go back here. The decisions will run, and then once the decisions are run, the next day you'll be able to log back in and you'll see new data. So that's pretty much it. Again, if you have any questions, please let me know. Thanks. Have a great time.